the John Top of It show. Hey everyone, welcome to the John Top of It show. I am your host, John Meisberg, and today we have our guest, Natalie Doud. She is a mother that is also a polyamorous parent. Natalie, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Viewers out there, like this video if you're interested in the topic of polyamory or being a polyamorous parent, so more people can see it, and make sure to share it with your friends so they can tune in. And don't forget to try to ask any questions that you might have during the interview in the chat, and we will try to get to them at the end. All right. So I'm going to play to the lowest common denominator. Like, there's probably some people out there that are like, well, what is polyamory? Like, how would you describe that to like a person that you think doesn't know a lot about a lot?
Yeah, sure. So polyamory literally means multiple loves. And a lot of people kind of wonder, how can you do that? How does that work? But one of the things I like to remind people is that we all have many loves. We love our family and our children and our parents. And so our heart has the capacity to love a lot of people. It's just that polyamory includes romantic love in that, or it can. And there's so many different forms that it takes. So to be able to define what it is often comes in the form of defining what it's not. Which another metaphor that I like to use is it's like going to the sandwich shop, and you can either choose the default like number 4 or number 5 sandwich, or you can choose the make your own. And so in a lot of my life, relationships and career path and everything included, I choose the make your own option. That means there's not necessarily like a script I'm following or like defaults. So everything is a new question. It's all about the agreements that you have within yourself and within your partners. And there's no defaults or assumptions. And that can be sometimes a challenging thing, but it can also be a really freeing thing.
And it sounds to me like, we're born and we are told like, hey, these are how things are in society, and you should plug into how things already are. And then you have the option to do that, or you have the option to like invent how you want to exist in reality. And it sounds like monogamy is like the way that we're told to plug in, but it's not necessarily the only way to interact, to interface with other people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I saw on Reddit there was this meme that said that this is a way to explain it to a monogamous person. And it said, you love cheese, right? And he said, yeah, I fucking love cheese. So you only love cheddar, right? And he said, cheddar is great, but so is brie, Munster, and Gouda. And he said, do you love brie for the same reason you love cheddar? I mean, they taste the same, right? He said, of course not. You can't compare cheddar to brie. They're totally different. And he said, does your love of cheddar reduce your love of brie? He said, of course not. I love them both. And I thought that was interesting to think about. It's like,
it's a
like,
good metaphor.
Well, it's pretty good. It's like, I think like a lot of people, they're like, if someone is in a relationship with more than one person, that they must not like one of those people as much, but exactly. It's like, do you feel that way about cheese though? Like,
well, and I think it's such a funny thing because it would be unthinkable to say that line of reasoning about your children. Like, you had one child and then you had another. Does that mean you don't like your first child? Like, come on.
It's very similar logic. Let's see. Here's another one that's kind of similar. It says, I was talking to someone who's not polyamorous about my girlfriend, but what if she likes him more than she likes you? How would you deal with that? She asked. That's impossible, I said. That sounds pretty arrogant. What if she thinks he's better than you? Well, let me clarify. He cannot possibly be better than me at being me, just like I can't be better than him at being him. I'm a banana and he's an orange. she loves bananas and she loves oranges, but an orange is always going to be a better orange than a banana, and a banana beats an orange at being a banana every time. And he said, what? When she wants a banana, here I am. When she wants an orange, he's her man. And they said, well, what if she wants a fruit salad? And they said, that's what board game nights are for.
Definitely seen that one. I like that.
So, yeah, what do you think? I mean...
Yeah, and I mean, I think that that is also speaking a little bit to the concept of what we call kitchen table poly. So there's...
What's that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different terms for a lot of different kinds of polyamory. But the term kitchen table refers to the idea that, like, you're all a family and all of your partners kind of, like, can come together at the kitchen table.
So it's like maybe you don't all have relationships with each other, but you're still amicable. You still can spend time with each other.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that a lot of times that's seen as a goal. And I would say that in the many years that we've been doing this, we've ebbed and flowed in and out of, like, that style. Either like that each person has, like, their relationships and they commingle to some extent, versus, like, we do things together a lot. And that just, like, ebbs and flows naturally. And I think that really the only problem that you can run into is if you try to make it one way, and that's just fighting the, like, natural state of it. Because there will be times when everybody gets together and gets along really well. And there's times when that's just not how life is flowing at the time. And I wouldn't say that one way is better or worse than the other way.
So a lot of that probably depends on the personalities of the people involved.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you consider yourself to be, like, an introverted person or an extroverted person?
I personally am an extrovert.
Okay. Do you think that this is true? Here, look at this one. Polyamory is a systematic way for introverts to pass their extroverted partners around so that the extroverts stop bothering them and they can read a book or whatever.
I suppose there's some truth to that.
Well, I mean, it's probably getting at that everyone has needs that need to be met, and sometimes the person that, you know, might be perfect to you in a lot of ways isn't always going to be into everything that you're into. And I guess I've heard in argument against that, though, from other people, like, well, yeah, that's what friends are for. You don't have to have a romantic or sexual relationship with them just because they like to read and your partner doesn't. I don't know.
And you certainly don't.
You
have
don't.
To.
Yeah.
You don't have to do
you don't
anything.
Have to. No, there's no one's holding a gun to your head. But I guess the question that maybe this interview is about and polyamory is about is, like, well, why not though? Right? Yeah.
And I mean, I think that it's always dependent on who you are and what your relationship looks like. And the best thing is if you've got somebody who wants to be poly, who's in a relationship with somebody else who also wants to be polyamorous, and that works out for them. When it gets hard is when you have a relationship where one person feels fundamentally polyamorous and the other person feels fundamentally monogamous. And then that's a challenge you have to work through. Personally, that's not been something that I've had to deal with, but that often becomes the challenge between those.
That sounds like something that probably happens a lot, where it's, like, unbalanced, like, not necessarily both people want the same thing because everyone's different.
Yeah.
That is tricky. So, but I mean, even monogamous relationships have challenges. It's just different challenges.
Exactly.
I don't know. I think coming from a person that's in a monogamous relationship, I think about it and I think that the initial reaction would be, there's already challenges in a monogamous relationship with one person. Then compounding that just sounds like even more, it's like expert mode almost, like, oh my God, like, I think things are hard already. It's like, it's going to take it up to another level.
And it does, it does increase the challenge in some ways. And it certainly makes the need for having emotional tools and communication tools really important. But I think I would again bring it to the metaphor of children, which it's like, oh my gosh, it's already hard having one child. Like, I don't know if I can handle having 2, 3, 4 children. Like, it does get exponentially harder every time you have more children. But, a lot of people feel that the love is worth it and that what they get out of it is worth it.
And also, yes and no. Like, I'm actually one of 6 kids, and my mom would argue that there were this effect where, as the 3rd kid was born and the 4th kid was born, the 1st and the 2nd starts to pitch in to help with the 3rd and the 4th. And it's like, you have more people to help. And one of the things that I've read about polyamorous parenting and relationships that we were going to get to later is that, you got more people on board, you have more resources available, you have more hands
Absolutely.
and brains to problem solve. Like, in some ways it can be a positive. Like, people, I think there's this mentality in society to immediately jump to all of the problems of polyamory and not even consider maybe the benefits. They're just like in defensive mode. They're like, oh, what about cheating? And what about the kid? I don't know. You know what I mean?
That's funny actually, because, cheating in certain ways is really only a problem in monogamous relationships. And, people ask what cheating in a poly relationship is, and really it just means like lying. But, polyamory gets you away from that as a problem, because theoretically you can do whatever you want as long as you put the emotional labor in to negotiate that.
Yeah.
But as far as making things easier, it absolutely makes things easier in so many ways. And so, not only in the ways of parenting, but also like, my partner is having a hard time, as long as and here's a term I'm going to throw out, metamor. That means my partner's partner.
Okay.
So as long as my partner's partner, my metamor, is somebody who has a positive impact on my partner, then they're having a hard time. They go off to their partner and come back, and now suddenly they're happier and they're calmer and like their issues have been solved, and I didn't have to do it.
So you see it as a form of self-care for them.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Almost like going to see a counselor.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay, so how about before we dive too far into your personal experience, let's just level set and define some terms. So like for polyamorous relationships, what are the common forms that it can take from your understanding?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of forms it can take.
Maybe just like the main ones.
So you can be solo poly, which basically means that you are your own primary partner, and you can have multiple relationships, but ultimately it comes down to you and your own personal agreements with yourself. And your partners don't really have to do with each other much. And then there's like varying levels of hierarchy and varying levels of like agreements-based polyamory. And so, and on the other end of the spectrum, there is relationship anarchy, which,
do whatever you want.
I mean, it's like you define everything, you make up your own rules, and that can contain the concept of agreements. So, right, let's say you're a relationship anarchist and a solo poly person. So you like have a relationship with somebody who happens to have hierarchical polyamory. So let's say you are your own you would consider yourself a single person who is also dating people, and you're dating maybe a married person, and they have their own hierarchical rules. Maybe their rules are, and maybe their boundaries or their definitions of their relationship include, you can go on dates when it works for our family and when our family is available for that kind of thing, so long as you like put our family first. So then the solo polyamorist is maybe in a relationship with this person who has these rules of definitions of their own, but for them personally, they don't have rules or hierarchy in their own.
They probably need some kind of like Word document to keep track of
Some people do.
Like all the rules and notes for like each relationship that they have. It's like you don't want to like mix them up. You're like, oh, I forgot. I thought that you were like, no, that was that other person you're with.
Well, and this is where I really don't like the concept of rules. There are a lot of people who do rules, and I would argue that oftentimes those rules don't work for them because people try to use this concept of rules as a way of putting a boundary on somebody else as opposed to for themselves. And so one of the most important things that people who have been doing poly for, and I should say polyamory, within the community, polyam is the accepted short term. I'm accustomed to the word poly because I've been using it for so long, but it became problematic when people realized that it's a term that Polynesian people like to use for themselves.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So I may throw out the term poly from time to time because it's something I'm so used to, but sort of to be...
Kind of an antiquated term.
Yeah, I should really be saying polyam or polyamorous.
Okay.
So sort of to get back to this idea of boundaries, people who are new to polyamory try to they try to shield their heart by putting up enough rules that they think they won't get hurt. And oftentimes this comes out in really either like sort of hetero or like male-centric ways or like couples privilege ways. People will come up with this concept of a one penis policy, which is like, cool. Like, I like the idea of hot lesbians and like bisexual women, but I don't like the idea of threatening other males. So you, my bisexual wife, can have sex with other women, but not men.
This is the most common form of polyamory that I see personally, in my view, is it'll be like a man and a woman are together, and then the woman has she has like a girlfriend on the side, and that's I feel like that represents probably like 9 out of 10 polyamorous relationships I've personally been exposed to. I know like a few that are a little different, but that's like the mainstream kind of.
Yeah, if you enter really into any polyamory group discussion, like 90% of the posts are going to be about people who are new to polyamory saying, how do I find a third? And that's also called unicorn hunting. And then everybody who has been in the group for a while kind of bashes on them and says, like, tells them what's everything that's problematic about that concept. And it is pretty rooted in fragile masculinity and like heteropatriarchy. And it's really problematic for bisexual women who may be interested in that kind of relationship in a way that is
they're being
equitable.
limited. They're being limited to only other women because of their male partners' insecurities.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the main problematic aspect of it. Is like you're putting limits on not yourself but your partner. And if you want to have a healthy polyamorous relationship, the limitations that you set should probably be the limitations you're setting for yourself as a person, and then respect your partner's boundaries individually.
Right. And
but that's hard for people to do, I bet.
Yeah, it's really hard for people to do because they want to shield their heart, and they realize they'll ultimately, after you do it for a long time, realize there's no shielding your heart in whether you're in a monogamous or a polyamorous relationship. You can't just rules yourself away from getting hurt.
But isn't it that like the issue is that a lot of people's personal boundaries for themselves somehow involve their partner? You know what I mean? It's like, it's my personal boundary is that you don't do this. It's like, it doesn't make sense, but that's how they think about it, I guess.
Right. And so let's say that we're going to take the same concept and the same fears and put it in a healthy way to do boundaries. So, okay, you think that your boundary involves, I can't be in a relationship with a woman who has sex with another man. So then rather than saying, my boundary is that you can't have sex with another man, you have to really question whether that's actually your boundary, because if that's actually your boundary, then you say, my boundary is that I can't personally be in a relationship with a woman who's having sex with another man. And therefore, if my personal boundary is crossed, I am going to remove myself from that situation. So
what are you going to do?
So what you're going to do is you then leave the relationship. And so if you're not actually going to leave the relationship because something like that happens, then it's not a boundary. You could also say, my boundary is that I don't want to hear you and your other partner having sex. So sometimes that will come out as, you and your partner can't have sex in my bedroom, or you can't have sex in my house. Well, you could try to say that, but you're gonna run into some problems because you're trying to police their actions. But what you can do is you can define your own actions. So you can say, if you and your partner are having sex in an area where I will leave. And that's just a really subtle but super important distinction about boundaries.
So something that's coming to mind right now is like the hangups that people have with polyamory is centered around jealousy or insecurity in general. And would you say that for anyone out there that has those initial thoughts and feelings when they think about the possibility of trying this out, that it's not for them and they're not wired for it? Or is it a skill? Is it something that you can acquire through practice and understanding? Like, or is it something that is just like, oh, I'm either wired for it or I'm not?
I think the answer is yes.
It's a little of both.
Yeah, it's a little of both, because I think that it takes a lot of self-inquiry to ask yourself and to really delve down of like, is this truly who I am, or is this cultural programming?
Yeah.
And you
could ask that about like everything in your whole life.
So many things. So it does take a lot of self-inquiry, because we have been so programmed to believe that, like, especially males in our culture, that like if your partner is with somebody else, you have to beat them up, or it makes you less of a man, or whatever the cultural programming tells us. And so the question is it worth it to you to work on that programming, and do the benefits outweigh the negatives for you personally? And sometimes you don't know that until you try it.
Yeah.
But I've definitely seen time and time again people who feel like they could never get past this huge hurdle. And then years go by, they work on it and they work on it and work on it. And someday, like one day, and they don't even know when it happened, they look back and they go, well, damn, like that was somebody else. That must have been a different person, because I have just changed so much in my ability to process these feelings and work with this. And
yeah,
it's
a good thing that when you look back and you don't recognize yourself, that means that you've grown a lot. If you look back and you're like, it's the same person, you're like, oh, what happened? I need to do some more internal discovery. But so how long have you been polyamorous?
So, my little quip that I like to say is, my husband and I waited until marriage to become polyamorous.
Okay.
So,
how many years ago was that?
We got married in 2011.
Okay. So 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so you have quite a lot of experience.
I have, and I think that is really the one thing that makes our polyamorous family so much different from most polyamorous people you will meet. Is the one thing that people tend to be surprised about and notice is just how long-term most of our relationships are. My husband and I got together when I was 14 and he was 15.
Oh, wow.
This was in 2004. And we always knew that we were going to be together.
So you guys were together for 7 years before you got married?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where it's like, by the time we got married, we felt really safe and secure with each other.
Was this your first relationship?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So my high school sweetheart.
Did that influence your curiosity about wanting to see what it's like to be with somebody else other than the only person you've been with?
Yeah, I would say that for sure.
I mean, I'm sure that's what viewers out there probably thinking, like, she was with one person. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's also maybe part of what made it kind of fraught in the beginning of like, oh, like now you've had this experience that I haven't, and we have to even the scales.
Because your partner had other relationships.
Well, I guess he kind of had, but like.
Because how many can you have at 15?
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, by the time that we were engaged, it was something that I didn't necessarily consciously think about as a choice, but I would say I'm a pretty like adventurous person. And so it sort of just came to light that I was interested in something more than like the traditional setup that is expected.
So did you broach this topic to him, or did he talk about it to you? And how did he take it? I think that's maybe another thing that maybe people in monogamous relationships think about is like, if I bring this up, they're going to think I don't like them anymore. Right?
Yeah, I
like,
would
or they're not
say
enough, and it's going to cause rifts in the relationship.
that all might be true. Like your fears are all true.
Yeah. It's like
and
it's like a just something that's bound to happen to potentially transition towards something. It's like something that has to happen, you're saying.
Yeah, there's growing pains, and just because you have a bad feeling doesn't mean you can't work through it. Any change in life is hard. If you have to move for a job, it's hard. Like everything's hard.
Yeah.
So it's just what kind of hard do you want to do?
Yeah.
So for us, it was kind of like I didn't really consciously bring it up, but like we got engaged, and I ended up going to a high school friend's party, and then sort of fell into getting pretty close to the line with a girlfriend from high school, and then came back sort of like crying about like, oh, I made a mistake, and he sort
like,
of
maybe like you start to feel like you're getting into like the emotional cheating kind of
right.
feeling.
It was like I felt like I had like I hadn't been able to like withstand temptation or whatever it was, and we had such a like relationship. We do and have still like have always had such a relationship based on honesty that like the idea that I would have like not just immediately told him, like I drove home in the middle of the night and was like, I did this thing. And so he like remembers that day as like looking at a nexus point where he like saw the path of like going down the like traditional culturally expected path of like righteous indignation. But then he saw another path of like, I could get something out of this too path. And he sort of like sat there with that for a minute and thought like, like, okay, like this could be something that we do with ourselves. This could be something that we try of like being more open. And so I would say that like that kicked off like a year of like that uncomfortable feeling of like the balance being off and trying to make it even. And
what do you mean by that?
Well, because I had an experience and he had not.
Okay.
And so it's like, well, let's try to do this. Like we were gonna like try to like intentionally make that happen, but it's like, you know, not something that's super easy to just like be like, this must happen and we're going to do it now. So like a year of this like sort of like strange like imbalance, and then our wedding comes around and my bachelorette party comes around, and I swear to you, I propositioned most of my bachelorettes.
Ethically, because you had already gotten to a place.
We had already like talked about like it was like for us, and this is where like I am gonna be like completely honest that like that thing that everybody does that super sucks of like unicorn hunting.
Yeah,
that's how I got into polyamory.
Yeah,
like, we were absolutely the worst.
Yeah,
like we did that thing.
Yeah,
but like
it's part of the growth.
It's part of the growth process. You have to make your mistakes and learn. You have to learn. Kind of by like doing it. And so that we sort of stumbled into polyamory that way. And like years go by, and Alex had a classmate in medical school, and they were interested in each other, and she had a partner as well. So, you know, that took some time, and ultimately the four of us ended up getting together like as a quad.
Or everyone's with everyone, or it's, I guess it could mean different things to different people.
Yeah. Well, you know, almost everyone's with everyone.
Yeah.
Like
okay.
The two men didn't have a relationship with each other in that particular instance.
Yeah. I think that's maybe a lot of men's apprehension to hearing stuff like that is like, I don't see myself as somebody who's attracted to men. It's like, oh, if I do something like that, there's going to be an expectation for me to start doing things with men. They're like, I don't know.
Sure. And I mean, like, I think depending on your personal level of toxic masculinity, like, nobody's going to force you to, like, you know, actually do something.
Take one for the team.
Yeah, like, nobody's going to force you to do that.
Yeah.
But you may have to, like, I mean, not have to, but, like, you may end up in a situation where, like, things are going pretty well for you. And if you can, like, stand the sight of another man naked, like, it's going to go really well for you.
All right. So I've lost my train of thought. I was going to say is that before you were polyamorous, when you were monogamous, I guess since you only had one partner, no experience with cheating or anything like that.
Right. Like, not until, like, that one, like, day I come home,
I see.
like, I'll front.
Okay. So I have a story. I was in a relationship for seven years, married for 2 of those years, and it actually ended in my first wife cheating with my best friend. And before it happened, I think that we had talked a lot about, like, how, you know, monogamy can sometimes lead to this feeling of maybe, like, not that they're not enough, just like it's hard to keep things interesting and hard to keep the, like, a topic that kept coming up was like new relationship energy, like the way it feels when you first get with somebody, that feeling. It's like you just never, it seems like you can't get it back. It's just gone.
It's a drug.
It's like a drug. Yeah. And I don't know. I think, you know, just like any relationship, like maybe you love that person, you see them as like your quote unquote life partner, but you're also trying to, like, you want to still feel those good feelings. And it's like, if I don't know, is there a way that I can get them back from my current partner? Is there a way that I can somehow, like, get them from other people and, like, integrate the way that I feel, and it, like, reinvigorates my current like sexual relationship? I don't know. But, like, we had talked about stuff like that. Nothing ever came to fruition, but I had always wondered if a big part of, like, why people cheat in monogamous relationships can be this, like, constricting feeling of, like, that you have no options. Like, you know, for men, I think it's like, for some people, it's just like, you can either go look at pornography and just, like, neglect and, like, I don't even think that's very healthy either, but, like, I guess it depends on how you're using it. But this is getting real now. I just wonder, in monogamous relationships, if we're setting, like, these unrealistic expectations of what people are expected to do for their entire life and somehow maintain happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
am I being clear?
I think that makes sense. I think people feel like they don't have a way out and they don't have an option, and so their, like, only option is deceit.
Yeah.
And that's pretty sad, and that's why it's really important for me to get the message out there that, like, polyamory is an option for you, for anyone.
But why do you think it doesn't feel like an option?
Well, I mean, first of all, like, our cultural programming says that it isn't an option, and it doesn't even occur to people. Like, it didn't even occur to us that was an option until, like, we, like, sat with it for a really long time. And so I think that, like, is what drives people to dishonesty. But I think that
I think there's just a lot of stigma still attached to it, if I'm being honest. I mean, maybe that's my own thing, but, like, I feel so much stigma thinking about polyamory just because the way I interpret it, a partner interpreting it is, and I mean, I think that every partner would be different, but maybe just the people that I think about in my own life, that they would see it as a threat, that another person's going to replace them, that it's going to destroy the relationship that they have with you, that it's like splitting your time with other people can only be a bad thing for you. Like, just, I start to think about all of the different defense mechanism quotes that come up, and I think that that's where a lot of the stigma lies. That I'm
kinda,
hoping we
like-
can talk about, but
Yeah, that kind of makes me think of a book I like just started, but like Byron Katie talks about the work, and so the like in terms of like when you have like really challenging thoughts that hurt to feel those thoughts, the work says to ask yourself, and I don't know if I'm going to quote this right because
this person.
yeah. So I don't know if I'm going to quote these questions that she has you ask properly, but the first question is it true?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second question is, can you know that for sure?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the sticking point of like, you really can't know anything for sure comes in. And so once you ask yourself, is it true? And can I know that for sure? And if you can't know it for sure, then the follow-up question is like, what else could be what else could it be?
Yeah.
And like, how could I feel? Who would I be without that thought?
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel freer without that thought, then maybe you can think about it in a different way.
Interesting. I mean, one of the main statements that I've heard when it comes to defending polyamory is monogamy isn't a safe bet either. Like, people who are monogamous get divorced all the time.
Oh, yeah.
People that are monogamous get into fights and get divorced all the time, and they're not happy too. Like, it's like you're not safe doing that.
Right.
It's if somebody's unhappy in a monogamous relationship, it's like locking them down from having any other experiences isn't going to protect your relationship.
Yeah, that's where I was saying, like, there is nothing that you can do to protect yourself or your loved ones from emotional pain. There's no rules or boundaries or like walls you can put up that's going to keep you safe. And like the best thing you can do is to be emotionally vulnerable and to allow yourself to feel all the feelings and to sit with it and to be honest about who you are, what you want, who they are and what they want, and have the hard conversations.
Yeah, I think a lot of people shy away from hard, which is probably why this is less of a mainstream concept.
Yeah.
Just because it's like people tend to default to easy, right? Would you agree to that?
Yeah, and I think that
Don't make me think about it.
They default to easy in the moment, which leads to harder later. I think sometimes that's where you get cheating, right? It's like it feels easier in the moment to say, well, neither of us are going to have any other experiences than each other, but because you didn't have those conversations, maybe you'd miss the fact that you both actually wanted something and neither of you talked about it, and then you end up running into this thing of like, well, shit, we didn't talk about this, and like somebody cheated and now it's just broken beyond repair.
Yeah. So it's like better to be proactive than try to pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned to me earlier, so we're talking about how you met your partner, how you became polyamorous. You mentioned to me that you have a company together, Synaptic Design. I thought we could briefly touch on this. I thought it was kind of interesting. So you guys have worked on some projects together, or maybe tell me about what does he do?
So my husband is, a lot of things, but a neurologist and a biomedical engineer.
Wow.
Yeah. I should now say our husband. We recently got married to our wife last summer.
Okay.
He and I started this company called Synaptic Design back in Minnesota, just not too long after we became polyamorous. And this lasted for, I think, 2 years in its like largest conception, where we hired a lot of developers and designers, and we're really like churning that out as our primary thing. And then when we moved to Seattle in 2015, it to some extent disbanded, but we're still actually maintaining some of the projects and products that we initiated with that company. Mm-hmm. And I do think that to some extent, us running this company together was part of what made us feel so tightly together that we were less threatened by having like other like partners coming into the relationship, because not only did we have our like long-term emotional relationship and like romantic relationship together, but we also like had a business relationship together. And so it was a lot of togetherness, which
Used to sharing things.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're used to sharing, and we're pretty solid with each other. So I think what really helped us and our family be polyamorous is our roots. We've got really, really deep commitments with most of our relationships. I, at this point, am in a relationship with 5 people.
Oh, wow.
And the shortest term one of those has been together for 5 years. So that's a lot of deep roots, which makes it sort of safe to play within those bounds of like, maybe things are scary, but like, you know, is one fight gonna break a like commitment that's half of my, like, literally at this point over half of my lifetime. My entire adulthood has been in this relationship, at least like one of them. And so like, you know, at a certain point it's like, well, the idea that any given fight or any given problem would be big enough to shake such a deep root is just silly. So I think that's really what has helped us, is like our really, really long-term commitments.
So you're in 5 relationships?
I personally am in 5 relationships. I'm married to my husband. We're married to our wife. My husband and I are in that quad that we started off in Minnesota. So those are
3 and 4.
2 more. So that's 4. And then I have my own partner that's not partnered with those others that I met.
So where do you find the time?
Well, and that's where the longevity of it like comes up too, of like, you know, you ebb and flow into times where it's like, maybe there was like a point in my life where like I had like a hyper focus in like one relationship versus another. Two of those partners have now moved to Syracuse. And so that's like at this point mostly virtual, but like we did recently visit them. So, you know, not everybody is the same amount of time at the same time. And also there have been times where many of the relationships have been needing time at the same time. So, you know, there's times where it's like, oh wow, like I'm finding myself where I've got 5 relationships, but I'm also alone tonight because everybody's busy. But there'll also be nights where it's like, well, like, I don't know what I'm allowed to say on this podcast, like explicative. Everybody is having needs at the same time, and I am one person, and the amount of times I've wanted to duplicate myself is quite a few amount of times.
You feel like you could be like pulled in different directions at the same time.
Yeah. So I mean, that is one of, you know, time management is hard, especially for somebody who has ADHD, like me and pretty much everybody in my household all does. So
so wait, let's stop a second. That's interesting to me. Do you think that there is a correlation between people who are ADHD and people who are likely to be interested in polyamory?
That is a good question to explore.
I thought the answer to that is yes, and the reason is because you're so used to multiple thoughts and handling multitasking, multiple things at once. So the idea of being with multiple people is not really that foreign to you.
Yeah,
that's how I identify
a parallel
with it.
To our thoughts. Like most people like have a little bit more of a linear, like one thought at a time kind of train that happens in their head. Whereas like those of us with ADHD have like a circus in there. So it's like, you know. I
have heard some people getting kind of upset at the idea of that online, because it's usually brought up in the context of cheating. It's like, are people with ADHD more likely to cheat because they need to be with multiple people? And people are like, how dare you use somebody's neurological issues to condone such bad behavior, blah, blah, blah. I won't have it, good sir. But it's like, no, well, it's not about condoning it. It's about understanding it.
Yeah.
Like, what is driving it? It's interesting that you say all your partners have ADHD, though, because I have a therapist, and they say that people with ADHD are much more likely for their friends and for their partners to also have it as well.
Yeah.
And I think that that's very interesting. It's like, it's an attraction thing, I guess, but
Yeah. It feels like everybody in the world has ADHD because most of my circle does. So it just feels like the default, which is, I wouldn't say all of my partners do. I would say that
it's also a spectrum. It's like
yeah.
it's not everyone's at 100. It's somewhere between 0 and 100, I think. But you're also an artist. And you've said that you've created some art that's been inspired by your way of life. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess I'd say like all of my art is inspired by my life. But definitely this feeling of being so multiplicity supported. That's not the right way to say it, but so supported in such a multiplicity of ways. Has that one influenced this piece that I made while I was pregnant, which I guess I just felt really safe and secure, feeling like I had so much support.
One.
Yeah.
Don't ban us, Zuckerberg, please.
Yeah, there's like it's just art, you guys.
I love that the price has gone up. It's crossed out and it's gone up.
Oh, did I do that? See,
no, that's awesome.
In addition to being,
don't correct it. That's my favorite because it's like, yo, it just went up in value. You missed your opportunity, guys.
That's really funny.
Just leave it. It's perfect.
Yeah. I may have some like numerical dyslexia.
No, so. I actually think you should just do that to all of your artwork. Just like crossed out. Now it's worth more. Sorry.
It is for sale, you guys. So
the only thing I would change is make the text green now. So then it's like, ooh.
Oh, you missed your opportunity.
Yeah. Wait
a little longer. Yeah. I might just make it more.
Right. So tell me about this.
So this piece, I guess I am the foreground or the main pregnant person, and I tried to make the person holding me look like a ambiguous amalgamation of like all of the partners who have held and supported me throughout that time.
Oh, interesting.
So it's like
that's all the hands.
Well, and the hands too, yeah. So like there's like a person spooning me, who's like sort of like a stand-in for all my partners. And then there's like all those hands who may or may not be partners, maybe like family or friends. Just like feeling like there's so much support. And, and at the same time, there's like a little bit of a subtle energy of like, the hands looking a little overwhelming because there's like so much to the support to the point where it's like almost overwhelming,
like a zombie movie.
God, I'm so loved and supported, it's too much.
Oh, cool. This is trippy. I like it. And then tell me about this one.
This one I made in a workshop with Amanda Sage, and I was sort of thinking of the gravitational pull of relationships and how, even if I'm not like physically with any of them, my heart feels gravitationally tied and pulled, so that there's that spiritual connection wherever I am, in the way that you may not always see the moon, but it's always having an effect. So that's where this painting is called Tidal Heart, like the tides.
Cool.
So it just it really felt like in the way that gravity works, those hearts are like also pulling on my heart, and it's like a system that functions with that gravity.
Oh, there's a lot more thought to that picture than I would have initially thought just looking at it. And it's interesting to hear about like what is going through an artist's mind, like when they're creating something. Is that like what was in your mind before you created it, or what the thoughts it evoked after it was done?
Yes.
A little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a messy process creating, and it's like who can really say what's in the subconscious, the conscious, or like somewhere in between there. It's all a big mess.
Yeah. So, God, there's a lot to unpack here. So you have 5 relationships total. 5. Yeah. And So what about what are some misconceptions about your relationships that you have to talk to people about? Or maybe just misconceptions about polyamory in general that you're constantly like having to talk about.
Sure. Like, I mean, I think that a lot of people think of it as a lot more like male centric than it is.
Mm-hmm.
So like they look at our relationship, which happens to be, you know, 2 wives and a husband, and they look at it like, you know, like a Mormon, like polygamy marriage, and it's like there's your first wife and there's your second wife.
I just watched a show like this on.
I probably have seen it.
Oh yeah, it's on Netflix. I have to look it up. But it's like in Utah, and they like blew out the side of a wall.
We actually have aspirations to go
and
visit them. Oh, it's called. It has a stupid name. It's like something like something not sister wives. Gosh, I don't remember the exact title of it, but no, we actually saw an uncomfortable amount of ourselves in that in that show.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically like that without the patriarchy. So I definitely found myself when I watched that show thinking like, oh my God, like my pre-polyamorous self would have watched this show and like been disgusted. And just like absolutely barfed looking at like how the whole setup is. And you know, for somewhat good reason, because it's pretty patriarchal, and obviously like the men are allowed to have as many wives as they want. Yeah. We do really want to visit them and talk to, because they're a pretty like long-term stable community that makes polygamy work for them.
Yeah.
It's just they happen to do it.
This guy, yeah, that's him.
What does it say what the show is called? Enoch, yeah.
That's his name.
Yep.
All I know is I watched this show and I remember thinking like, how beautiful of a thing is it to build a community where everybody loves and cares about each other?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that it's so sad how isolated everyone is, and like I don't know, like
there's a lot of love there.
I mean, I guess you can accomplish that without everyone having sex with each other, but at the same time, it's like it doesn't seem to really occur. Like, I don't know. I think these people, in some ways, they have a really good thing going, that they have lots of friends and family that are all living next to each other, all there helping each other, group activities all the time. Like, I've always thought the idea of living in a commune sounds like, if it's like the right one, like it sounds actually pretty amazing.
Yeah, we definitely like flirt with the line of cultishness. We got our own aspirations for you know, the sort of homestead community living with all our partners together, and because there's 2 doctors in our communities, in our personal circle, we have not been able to have control over where we live very much. So it's been like a really long arc of trying to live together, which has had many ups and downs. But ultimately the goal is, it would be really nice for us to all have some sort of like community life where we all live in the same place and raise our children together whenever that can happen.
Yeah. I think this is the show. I think it's called 3 Wives, One Husband. Yeah.
I don't like the name.
Well, you know what my wife said when we watched the show together? Her first thought was, "Why is it always got to be a guy with lots of women?" She's like, "Why can't you have a woman with lots of guys?" And my first thought when she said that was, well, a man can impregnate lots of women at once, but a woman can only be impregnated once.
So if you're looking towards like maximum baby having,
that's the only thought I can have that makes sense, at least from a reproductive point of view. But I guess when you're getting at like just for recreation, there's no rhyme or reason really, other than just like the way that things have been. Yeah, and that's not really a fair way to reason it out. Yeah.
I mean, any gender can offer loving support. and for a family, that's pretty much all you need.
Yeah.
So yeah, as far as misconceptions, I would say like that's
sorry
probably
for
the biggest.
sidetracking.
No, the whole thing was like talking about our misconception, which is that like one of the biggest misconceptions is that we're like that show. And that like.
So you're not like that show.
No, I mean we are and we aren't.
Okay.
We're like that show in that we have like multiple loves and we have a family together.
You don't have 16 children.
We do not have. We have my nuclear family, if you would call it that, has one. Like I gave birth to one child, and then the couple that lives in Syracuse has a child. So she and I got pregnant at around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like 2 babies right now, but with plans and intention for more, and not from necessarily the same bodies.
I wrote down to define this. Actually, you mentioned nuclear family. That means core members of a family, like parents and children. So I was reading that the term, it stems from nucleus, that has origin meanings of just essential only, like something essential.
Sure. And I mean, I don't know that I would I mean, it's such a complicated term, especially for us. And it feels like...
My first thought when I hear nuclear family is like, oh, you guys blew up? Like, what does that mean?
Well, like the nucleus of an atom. And that everything is sort of like a contained system that's like somewhat inseparable, is I think what it's getting at.
Okay.
But... and I think it's a complicated term to use for our situation because it does feel a little bit like exclusionary of like, I think if I would say like our nuclear family, I probably mean those of us who are living together. So myself, my wife, my husband, and our baby, and actually our brother-in-law. So we all live in the house together, which is not to say that we may not all live in the house together with the Syracuse couple or, any of our other partners. But it does feel like there's like at least 2 houses. And so there's like, what does family mean is often sort of thrown around as a question.
When you have like different cultures, depending on where you are.
Yeah, kind of actually. Like our house is the ADD house and their house is not.
Okay. All right.
And that's where like when we went on our like trip to visit them, if it was an interesting experiment of living together, because I guess we've always thought that we wouldn't be compatible, the 2 houses living together, mostly because it's like OCD and ADD don't mix. And at least one member of their household is like OCD, whereas like our family is mostly like ADD. Yeah. So
one person thinks all the things in one room go in a very particular place, and the other person is like, fuck it.
I forget it's there if it's not right in front of my face.
Yeah.
And I think that part of what made it work and feel so right when we went to visit them was that we didn't bring all our shit with us.
Okay.
And so we do like accumulate a lot of stuff because we have like constantly a lot of projects happening. But it like occurred to me of like, we wouldn't necessarily have to have 2 houses next to each other and where like we live in one house and you live in another house. It could be we have 2 houses next to each other and we like all sleep in one house versus we all do our projects in the other house. So we like keep the chaos in the one side and like the orderliness in the other.
Lots of ways to set it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So misconceptions about your relationships is where were we saying that you're not like that family in the documentary.
Yeah.
What about not everybody has an intimate relationship with each other.
Right. I think that's another key.
Big misconception that people probably think about is like, are they all sleeping together? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah. And it's so hard to like pin that down because like that aspect of relationships ebbs and flows and changes so much over time that like any given timestamp that you would like ask who's having sex with who is like not necessarily like how it just is or always is.
Yeah.
Because like all the relationships ebb and flow. And so like for a while, actually like my wife and my husband had like a domestic relationship. And like like a loving relationship, but not necessarily like a romantic or sexual relationship. But that aspect of the relationship changed over time, and it was like we were all planning on getting married before that changed. And then somewhere in between the like engagement and the wedding, that changed. And it definitely changed the flavor of our relationship, because I was sort of like the center of the V. And so it turned from feeling more like, I was trying to balance two competing like interests of people who didn't necessarily like co intermingle fully anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then sort of when that changed, it made it feel like a lot more like a stable triangle. And of course, like change sort of like throws everything out of balance in any situation.
It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something new you have to learn how to deal with.
Yeah, and it like, there were aspects of it that for me felt like I like sort of suffered like a loss of attention. But there were also aspects where for me it made things a lot easier because I wasn't having to be the go-between anymore. So it's like there are pros and cons, and it's just what it is.
Mm-hmm. Thinking about this more, I think misconceptions about not necessarily your relationships, but like polyamory in general, it's maybe that the person is afraid of commitment. But I feel like in your situation, you have had these relationships for a very long time with so many people. If anything, you are more okay with commitment, that you're willing to take on so many people.
Yeah,
right?
I joke that I have a commitment issue or commitment problems in that I commit too much. I mean, not too much, but you know what I mean. It's like
overcommitter.
I'm an overcommitter. Or at least, I mean, I almost have this like reluctancy to like open myself up to any new relationships at this point, because it's like, well, shit, like every relationship I've started at this point has turned into a lifelong like deep connection. So like I don't know how much more room I've got for that, and like I don't know if I can do casual. Like everything is pretty serious for me. It's pretty funny just that like I've been in 5 relationships, or I am in 5 relationships, that I've never once had a breakup, or at least not one that has stuck.
You found a way to overcome the issue.
Yeah.
You've had okay, that's great. But do you ever feel taxed, like you're stretching yourself too thin?
There have definitely been times where I have felt that way. Like there was an era where the couple that now lives in Syracuse, the wife, who's a doctor, had to spend 1 year in Syracuse, and then she came back to Seattle for 2 years. And because it was only 1 year that she was going to be there, and she knew she was coming back, it didn't really make sense for the husband to join her for that year, because he already had a stable job, and there wouldn't have been time for him to start something new and then come back just to the same, like for the same job. And so because it was just 1 year, like he stayed back. And so they were separated, which then sort of put me in the position of trying to fill her role for both my husband and him, which was like, I'm already trying to juggle all of these other relationships, and now I have to like fill this hole that she's left. And that was a time that was pretty stressful for me, because everybody had like all of these needs, and I could only, it's like I had to like just make it explicit and say like, look, I can do my best to like be me for you, but I can't be me and her for you at the same time.
And meanwhile, throughout all of this, now you have a 17-month-old child.
Yeah.
So before we get into that, what were the conversations like with your husband about bringing a kid into this world, given the 5 relationships that you have concurrently?
Well, so he and I had always intended to have children.
Okay. But none of your relationship dynamics and how they changed, it didn't impact that line of thinking for him in any way. Because
No.
I think the concern might be wanting to have some kind of environment that is stable for the child, and just maybe not necessarily from him, but maybe from like your average person. It's just like, will we be able to give this kid I don't know, an environment that is stable? But I think that you've kind of had already proven that to each other because of how long you had been together.
Yeah.
And you
Well,
didn't
and
see it changing.
also that the conversation of children had been like on the table from the beginning with every relationship, and because we are so upfront about everything.
Yeah.
Like when we initiated the relationship with that couple, like we all talked about the fact that we were all interested in having children. So from the beginning with the relationship with the couple, that the other woman and I had always sort of talked about the idea of being pregnant at the same time.
Oh.
And
okay.
so we planned our lives around that and around her schedule as a doctor and around his schedule as a doctor.
So did that happen?
Yeah. So
Oh.
we have like two pretty similarly aged children.
Oh, cool.
At this point. Yeah. And so then when our wife came into the picture, sort of we were dating her in Minnesota, and when we all up and left for Seattle because the two doctors had to move here for residency, she was not ready to move at the time. So that's where we sort of like had a breakup. But then over time, we talked and realized that we did want to share life together. And so it was important for her that she really wanted to move out here to be with us before we had kids, because she wanted to be there like at the conception and to be there before we already settled into our life as a family.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where maybe her move out here was, I wouldn't want to say like necessarily rushed, but like she put her move on the timetable of wanting to be here to start a family with us. So it's all been planned around the family as opposed to sort of the family trying to fit into the gaps of the relationship. The relationships are like premeditated upon the idea of the family.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing. I think that this is such an interesting topic to me because the research that I've done around polyamory and kids, usually what a lot of people will say is just don't have them. Like, it's too complicated. But I love hearing from someone that has, so far, they found a way to successfully make it work within the relationship that they have. And so I think, it's really interesting to hear how you're doing it so far. You say that your partner moved to Seattle, or your wife. Something that I read when I was reading about the benefits of having a polyamorous family, I read this article. Here, let me show you. You might have seen it, but it's called "Polyamorous Parenting: The Surprising Benefits of the Ultimate Modern Family." And one of the examples in here, I think it's right here in the beginning, but basically it says this woman, she went into labor, she had to have a C-section, the baby was born, wasn't breathing, and the wife told the husband to go with the doctor to the resuscitation room and like monitor what's going on and report back, kind of thing. Meanwhile, their partner, which was a woman, stayed with her and like comforted her in the situation. And I was thinking like, yeah, that's right. Like in a monogamous relationship, it's like the guy goes and then she's just there by herself. And it's like little things like that, I think probably show up in a polyamorous relationship all the time, where if you're all in it together, where like you have a stronger support network.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think like that.
Do you feel like you have that with the wife?
Yeah, I think for sure. When we're functioning well, and when our communication is, when we're on our game with our communication, it flows really well, and we're able to sort of pass responsibility back and forth in a way that like ebbs and flows naturally and suits us for our abilities to like do our own thing when we want to. I can work on my art. She can work on her art. Like when I have the baby, she can like work on these masks. Insert plug for our Synaptic art masks that she sews and I designed.
Cool.
or that I
was wondering where that came from. I'm
it's
like,
my
ooh.
art on fabric, and she sews them.
It's kind of hypnotic. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. And so it allows us to fulfill our lives in gratifying ways, while also having the child taken care of. Now, the flip side of that is if our communication game is off, then we either are stressed out about like either putting an imposition upon each other, or like we either both want the to spend time with the child at the same time, or we both want to be doing our own thing at the same time, and then there's a clash of like
Who does it? Who takes one for the team?
yeah. And I think that that's where the sort of like emotional jujitsu of being able to like sit with your own negative thoughts and like do the emotional alchemy of like not looking at them in a negative light and not like telling the wrong story. Like if you are able to like see their needs and see your needs not as like conflicting, but like as complementary and like loving it all, then it's easier to like get through that. And I think that's where like the maybe like benefit of having like the default choosing number 6 on the sandwich menu gives you the like ability to not have to talk about it, because you like have those roles already divided, and you know like, my default expectation is that you fulfill these roles and you fulfill those roles, and we don't have to talk about it. But because we're not like following a script and we don't necessarily have a whole lot of role models or like defaults of expectations, everything is a conversation. And like, unless you talk about it really openly and really explicitly, then it can become problematic.
Yeah. So communication is key.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you the option. Would you rather talk about benefits of polyamorous parenting first, or concerns?
We're going to talk about them both.
I think we should.
Which one first? Yeah.
Unless you don't want to.
No, I do.
But
okay.
What do you feel more like talking about?
Well, let's get the concerns out of the way first.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about the benefits.
Yeah, and on a high note.
Yeah.
So some of the concerns that I saw in that article I showed you is they said, maybe I can mention the bullet points, and then you could, if you have anything to chime in about how it relates to your life or your relationships, can we do it like like that? So, let's see. It says, offering support to multiple people can be a challenge. The more people you're invested in, potentially the more support you need to give, which I guess gets back to what we were saying earlier, that you could be stretched too thin. I think we covered that. Clashing over parenting styles. So does you and your wife ever, or your husband, I mean, that's already a thing between like a husband and a wife. Like maybe I want something, my wife wants something, and they're different. It's like,
for sure.
It's just, but now it's that compounded with potentially a third or a fourth or a fifth person, right?
I would say we really lucked out in that we have pretty similar parenting styles, or at least amongst our household. And I think that there was a little bit of like clashing between the parenting styles of our household and their household. For a while, we were watching the other couple's child while they both went to work, and so there were some clashes about like just like their style versus our style. We are like maybe more on the like hippie, like free flow style, and they are a little bit more regimented, as you would expect out of like OCD versus like ADD household. So I mean, there were some clashes there, but as far as like within our personal family, my wife and I, first of all, do like more of the hands-on parenting than our husband does, and so our style often ends up being the one we do. But like,
That's nice.
yeah, yeah. It is like if you do it, if you're
Yeah.
the one doing the parenting, you're the one defining how you do it. Right?
Yeah.
But that's not to say that there haven't been like a little bit of clashes within that. In terms of like,
I'm trying to think about what do people tend to like get into arguments about. Probably like whether the kid's gonna be like religious or something. I don't know.
definitely not a clash for us.
Not an issue
It was
for
not
you.
an issue for us.
Yeah.
But I think one of the more recent ones that came up for us is that our toddler is getting kind of like violent, or like he like lashes out and like pulls the dog's hair and it just how to respond to that.
Yeah,
and,
what's the appropriate
and honestly, like none of us
punishment or-
really know. So it's like there's like modeling appropriate behavior. There's how you respond when it actually happens. There's like just accepting that this is a phase that he'll grow out of, and a lot of different approaches. So I think that's maybe been like the most salient one within our household that's come up.
Okay. Another potential concern that they were mentioning about polyamorous parenting is that, and I don't think this is as applicable to you because you've had some very long-term relationships, but that and haven't really experienced breakups. But I guess in polyamory, I guess theoretically there'd be more people to say goodbye to more frequently. And the article says, no kid is well raised in a shifting community of NRE junkies.
Woof.
So I think that could be true, but it could also not be true. It depends on the people and the relationship dynamics, right?
Yeah. Well, I want to do like a little shout out to like ORE because
What's ORE?
I think I just coined that term. I don't know if anybody else uses that, but
Old
like,
relationship.
yeah,
energy.
yeah.
Okay.
Like there is just like so much to be said. Like I feel like there like people talk about NRE a lot.
Interesting.
And that's like this super like high octane addicting feeling. But like I just want to like send out a moment of appreciation for old relationship energy, which like really lets you feel like safe, comforted, secure, at home. And like there's just like so much about that energy.
I find that feeling comparable to like visiting a new city and seeing like places to eat that you're familiar with. You're like, oh yeah, like worst case scenario, I can always get a Starbucks, you know.
Yeah.
It may not be the best coffee, but I know it.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess again in every family there are people who come and go. Like I was just watching like baby childhood videos of like when I was a child, and there were family friends who I was like, you know, Mom, like these people look like they were like heavily in our life, and I also have no memory of them. So like, what happened? Like,
who are they?
Who are they? Yeah, and so it's just interesting because you can have falling outs with people who are like just really good friends as well.
It's just the concern, I guess, is when you have a child in the picture that perhaps that a child can't somehow handle the idea of bringing in a person to then take them away. Like, what is that concern? Because people, I mean, this happens in like single parent homes where they start dating and they're like, how soon is too soon for him or her to meet my child, right? Like that kind of thing. Like, is the mentality that children are not capable of the idea that a romantic partner may not be around long term? Like, what is that?
Yeah, I don't know. To me, that reads as like another attempt at shielding our hearts from pain. Which just doesn't feel possible.
Like telling your kids that you'll never die, you'll always be there.
Yeah, it's like there's no fucking guarantees in life. There just really aren't. And
then it's getting into like helicopter parenting or coddling. Like how old is how young is too young to be real with your child? And I think this is interesting to me too, because I just had a child, and it's like, when do you tell your kid, you know, Santa's not real? When do you like tell them the truth about things? I'm very interested in that. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know the answer to that. And I think that we, like you were saying earlier, it's like there are the combo meals on the board. Like you look in your environment and you're like, this is how things are done in society. I guess I'll do it this way because that's what other people do. But is that the right way? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's important to sit with the questions.
Yeah.
Just even asking the questions themselves
Yeah.
is like most of the work.
So, okay, but let's talk about you. You have a 17-month-old kid. All your partners are around you would bring all your partners around your kid because you've developed this strong relationship with them. Say your kid is 5 years old and you get partner number 6. Like, would you let that partner be in the kid's life immediately? Like, or how long do you think maybe it's not about the time, but more so like how you feel about the partner and however long it takes to get to a certain point.
Yeah.
But what is that predicated on?
Man, I don't even know if that's necessarily something that I've put a whole lot of thought into at this time.
I know, I'm just trying to
I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
And I guess my instinct would be that it's better to have loved and lost.
Yeah. Well, what would you say to a kid what would you say to your kid if one of his favorite partners in his life just had to disappeared and decided I'm out? Like, how would you explain that?
Well, I mean, I think it would kind of like depend, right? Like, let's say that like the partner and I decided that we weren't right for each other, but that there was still a love between my child and that person. I would like to think that I would allow the child to still have the relationship with that person and like still have calls or visits if it was important to them.
It almost sounds like something that monogamous people seem to be incapable of doing, which is sticking around after the breakup.
Yeah,
or do you think polyamorous people are more likely to be able to have some kind of platonic relationship afterwards because of their ability to communicate better? Or
I would like to think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to think that like at least polyamorous people are more like accepting of the various gray area nuances of relationships and that things don't have to like be on this like black and white binary,
all or nothing
binary. Yeah. And I would like to respect my child's relationships as separate from mine. And so I think that if my child like felt a bond or a relationship with somebody that I didn't have a relationship with, I would help foster their relationship outside of me having that relationship if it was important to them.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I think maybe what ends up happening is one parent maybe puts the feelings of themselves above their child because they don't want to see that person they broke up with anymore. Mm-hmm. And that means I don't care if the kid wants to see them. I don't want to see them. And I know if my kid sees them, I'm going to have to see them again. Well, I think there's something to that. That's what's happening.
Too. And I mean, I think that there is something to be said for like, if it was like hard and traumatic enough of a breakup that like it's just not healthy for either of you to be seeing each other.
Yeah.
Like at that point, you know, it's sad, but like it's healthier for everybody to have some space from each other, and that's just how life fucking goes sometimes.
And maybe in some ways that's good for the kid to learn early.
Yeah,
I mean why are we saying that a young kid can't learn that? I don't know. I think it's just we just try to protect them from everything.
Yeah.
But maybe we overprotect.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the big one. A concern that people have about polyamorous parenting is jealousy and how that affects the relationship, and which could potentially lead to the breakups, I guess.
So wait, whose jealousy are we talking about here?
Well, any of the partners that are involved together. It's like while there is a kid being raised. I mean, I guess if you could take a step back and say that, you know, jealousy is an issue, could potentially be an issue in a polyamorous relationship. Mm-hmm. But how could that then negatively impact raising a child? Where I guess the answer to that would be if a partner ends up leaving because of it.
Sure. I guess that's similar to the last question.
Yeah, it is. You're right.
Yeah.
But you know what we haven't really gotten into is you personally have you experienced jealousy? Has your partner experienced jealousy? How do you guys deal with those feelings? Is it normal? Is it normal to feel it? And and it's not something that we're supposed to try to overcome? Or like, what's your relationship with jealousy?
So I think that actually is a good point that we missed in the misconceptions. Is
Okay.
I think that the misconceptions are that when you are polyamorous, you either completely transcend jealousy or it is like a cornerstone of your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that, jealousy is a feeling just like any other feeling that we all experience from day to day for any reason. And, I've had times where like myself or my wife have been like, jealous of the time that my husband spends at work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's that. But also
You can be jealous of things other than a partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I have like felt jealousy towards other partners. And I think that the key is that I think in monogamous relationships, jealousy is often seen as having more like actionable validity to it, whereas it's something that needs to be heard. It is something that needs to be heard and acted upon, but the action is not outward. The action is, it's jealousy is always telling you what you need, and it often has a circumscribed way of doing it. It'll tell you that the other person is the reason why you're upset, but really the other person is just highlighting something you wish you had, or you feel
Some
is a
kind of
need that's being
insecurity.
unmet. Yeah. If you're feeling totally secure in your relationship, realistically, you're probably not going to feel so super jealous when somebody else comes around. But often jealousy is saying, this is something that you're missing in your relationship. And so if you're really good at navigating jealousy, you just like, you sit with the feeling for a moment first. And so I think it's very important to sit with your feelings for at least a little bit before you share them. And sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But if you sit with it and then you ask it what it wants and you love the feeling, you sit there with the jealousy and it sucks and it feels bad, but you say, I love what you are doing to protect me. And what your jealousy is doing to protect you is it's saying there is something that's missing and it's a need that's not being met. And so you ask it what need is not being met. And maybe what that need is to feel wanted or to feel like your time is important. And so rather than coming to your partner and saying, like, I hate that you have this partner that you care about so much more than me, you go to them and you say, I've noticed that I was having feelings about this other partner, and it made me notice in myself that I don't feel like my time is being valued and that I need to feel like loved and respected by you. And maybe there's something that we can do together to make that feeling feel more real in us.
So like a common maybe scenario here would be your partner gets a new partner and then they are experiencing an NRE together, and then the old partner that's not a part of that feels jealous that their partner's having that experience, and so they can use that in a productive way to realize that they want to have those feelings as well from their old partner or from a new. Maybe it's pointing out that that's something that they need as well, and that's what the insecurity is.
Yeah, it's all love, right? It's like, it's sharp, pointy love. It's like, it's angry, sad, hurt love, but it's all love. And so I think that as the person expressing the feeling, if you can express it in a way that sort of like highlights and like centers the love, that's the best thing you can do. And as the person listening to the feeling, if you can be with the feeling and not get defensive and hear the love underneath, that's the best thing that you can do. And I know that I personally have responded well, and I've responded poorly, and I've also expressed it well and expressed it poorly.
Yeah.
And I think like you try your best to focus on the love, center the love, and hear the love.
Yeah, and I think by thinking that way, it's like you see the request from your partner not as, an attack, but more so just like trying to work on the relationship in some way.
If they didn't love you, they wouldn't feel jealous.
Yeah.
Which is also like that's a dangerous line to go down, right? Because the more jealous they feel, the more they love me. Like, and that's its own danger. But every feeling is coming from a place of love, because if they didn't feel anything for you, they wouldn't.
I think it is true though that it's a big misconception about in polyamory you're trying to eradicate jealousy. It's kind of reminds me of meditation in the sense that like a lot of people misconstrue that they think meditation means having no thoughts, but more so maybe allowing the thoughts to pass through you and being able to address those thoughts in a healthy way. It's like letting jealousy kind of like let the feeling arise, like notice it, see like what is it trying to teach you, and let it pass through you. It's very similar.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Interesting. But easier said than done.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
It's like we all need our own like maintenance. Like the other day, like I went and did a breath medicine ceremony, and I came back and I found myself in a situation where I was like, well, shit, like my old self, like a version of me that wasn't like being as grounded would respond to this poorly. Like I came home and I had my wife and husband watching the child while I was doing the ceremony. They like both had a pretty stressful time because he was crying a lot. So I come home and they're both pretty crabby. A past me would have, or at least like a not actively grounded me would have immediately felt guilty and defensive because I was the reason that they had to watch the child. They watched the child. They had a bad time. Now it's my fault. And now I'm too defensive to be able to be loving and supportive. And that sucks.
Yeah.
And that cycles because then they're like, well, in addition to making me watch the child, now you're mad at me and now you're not supportive and whatever. And it just cycles. Whereas like this time I had like just done this spiritual thing and I felt grounded and I felt like disconnected from my, I mean, not necessarily disconnected from my ego, but I felt uncontrolled by my ego. And I allowed those feelings and I saw the love through them. And then I was able to just like do everything that I could do to be supportive and just try my best to be supportive. And it was like, damn, why can't I just do this way all the time? But it was a reminder of like, you know what, we just need to like constantly be doing our own spiritual maintenance for the others. Because if I'm not doing my own spiritual maintenance with myself, if I don't work on myself, then that comes out to you. And the best thing I can do for you is work on me. Yeah.
And just remember that we're human. Like you're not going to be perfect. It's like you're trying to remember to do these things, but sometimes I feel like our reptilian brain takes over, and that's kind of like where jealousy comes from. But, you know, thinking back again for me about when I went through the cheating with my first wife, I think about like what kind of feelings did that evoke? It made me feel like she wanted to be with this person instead of me. But I wonder if we had you know, things had gone differently, if perhaps it was set up in a different way where like she wanted to be with somebody else in a just because they're different, but not as a replacement. But I think that cheating can kind of like cause a lot of trauma to where then you see everyone as a threat, like another person represents a replacement, not as trying something else that's self-care for your partner. But I think that over time, the more that I've thought about this is I think one of the ways that I personally address jealousy in my mind, and the way I've tried to work on it, is if your partner chooses somebody else to replace you, you're probably better off, right? Like, because everyone deserves to be with a person that chooses you, and that it's okay that there's like 7 billion people out there. Like, it's not like there's only one person that could ever, there's only one, it's not like there's only one person you could have a happy relationship with. And I think, like, those are the two things I remind myself, that there's always someone else that you could be happy with, and that your partner should choose you, and that if they don't choose you, then you're better off. And so those two things are kind of like what I think about to try to. That's what I thought about to try to process the trauma of being cheated on. To think about like my partner having, well, like in the current marriage that I'm in, it is a monogamous relationship, but like she has friends that are men and I have friends that are women, and that's what I think about when they have conversations or hang out, is that that ultimately, like, she is an independent person and she has to choose me, and I am an independent person and I have to choose her.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. Anyway, I'm just thinking about how do I address jealousy when I feel that like it like erupting inside me about a person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know
Yeah,
if
it's like, well, I think you're highlighting that like it doesn't matter what like structure or rules you have in your relationship. Jealousy is just a blanket feeling.
Yeah.
It's just like you can't get around it. Like humans just feel it.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter what happens, and it's like,
well, it's like it's defining a threat, and then I'm like trying to address my mind and say, well, is it a threat though? I don't think it's a threat.
Yeah, back to that like Byron Katie of like, is it true? Can
Yeah.
I whatever the other word is, like, can I definitively know that for sure that it's true?
Mm-hmm.
And it's, ultimately you can't and you don't.
Yeah. And I think another part of that is remembering that everyone is different, that like you can't use one experience in your life to extrapolate and say everyone's going to treat me, or my partner's is going to treat me the way that another person did. Like you have to give it. I feel like I try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Anyway, negative comments from friends or family. Have you dealt with anything regarding like tolerance of your relationships? Have you gone through that with your family? Or
well, I think like thankfully we all have pretty supportive family, and it's I've been really grateful that our families have all been so supportive of our relationships and our choices.
That's surprising to me.
Yeah.
Just because I would expect older generations to not understand this.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that for some of them it took some time. I think there was like some adjustment of like not understanding and like needing to work through some of the questions.
Yeah.
But I felt like along the way everybody had been coming from a position of loving us and caring for us. And their questions, were all coming from a place of wanting to make sure that we were happy.
Mm-hmm.
I had like an aunt whose biggest concern, because she had a divorce, so her biggest concern was actually for my wife. So when we said we were going to get married, her concern was that my wife wouldn't be legally supported.
Yeah, which is another thing I wanted to talk about. Is like a lot of people, the main reason they're getting married is for some of the rights that are granted, the legal protections that I guess this is something they bring up in that show on Netflix, which is like, the one person on paper is protected,
right,
but then everyone else is like a ghost.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I've had to work through is like, just as the things that I have to work through as like a white person of privilege in the world, I can't see the privileges that I have because it makes the struggles invisible to me unless like I am told of them and hear them. And so I've found that in the same way where I had to learn that as a white person, I walk around with certain privileges that others don't have access to, I've also had to like come around to the idea that like I get to live life with a certain sense of security because I'm the one legally married that she doesn't have. And so to the extent that I can either provide like emotional reassurance and have like conversations or like even like legal reassurance where like her father's a lawyer, and so he feels really strongly that he wants to like help set her up with as much like legal support as he can. And so like when we recently visited her parents, I felt like I was getting this like aggressive vibe from him. It was almost like, you know,
but
when
it comes from a place of love.
It comes from a place of love. Yeah, it was like when you're like the boyfriend, you come to the house and the dad's got like a shotgun or something.
Yeah, yikes.
Which like it obviously wasn't that far, but like I definitely felt like an energy of like, oh, like your protectiveness of her is like being directed at me, and I'm not often in that position, and it felt really weird. I had to like work through it and like, no, he loves her and he's trying to protect her, and I have to recognize that like I inherently have those protections whereas she doesn't. So he's like her attack dog.
Well, there's a lot to take.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, there's all these different concerns that people have with polyamorous parenting, but they are not concerns that can't be overcome, because clearly you're doing it. I think another one that I didn't bring up, but I think it's kind of like an obvious solution, which is STDs. But I guess it's like,
oh my God,
is that an obvious solution? Or
it is not an obvious solution.
I spoke too soon. Well, I have heard that in some polyamorous like relationships, like there's like a primary couple that doesn't want to use condoms, but then they're like, you have to use condoms with everyone else.
Yeah.
And then that becomes like a
like
source
this
of conflict.
Like concept of like fluid bonding is hard. I think the best thing I can say is that everybody now is having to experience what we've been having to experience our whole lives because everybody's in COVID, right? And so a handshake is now requiring the level of consent that like a blowjob does. Yeah. Or used to, right?
Well, I can't even imagine dating right now in the sense that like even kissing a stranger feels like a risk.
Yeah, you know, you and I like we're taking like a minimal risk right now because we're both wearing masks and everything, but we're still taking somewhat of a risk. And so like everything is in this like weird area that like we've dealt with it like for years.
Yeah.
It's always like you got to mitigate risk, and like you have to like balance what is important enough that's like worth it to you to take that risk. And some, you know, sometimes it's like really traumatic, but like if you all love each other and you all like consent to the risks that you're taking, like you get through it together. Like,
yeah,
I think that we probably experienced like one of the more traumatic experiences with STDs, where I had never had one in my whole life up until 1 week before I gave birth.
Ooh.
Yeah.
What'd you do?
Because apparently pregnancy makes you more vulnerable to these sorts of things. And so while nobody had any like new risk profile per se, we neglected the fact that pregnancy like minimizes your ability to like have an immunity or protect yourself. And so yeah, probably like one of the most traumatic things that happened to me in my life was hearing in my 41st week of pregnancy that yes, in fact, that is herpes, and no, in fact, that is not compatible with a natural birth. And so
what does that mean?
I had to have a C-section.
Oh.
Because if a child passes through the birth canal and does contract it, that can be fatal.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I was like gearing up and ready for having like I had read all of these books about like a spiritual birth, ecstatic, orgasmic birth, and like I did. You were
kind of bummed out that you didn't get to have it.
I was like prepared for the experience as much as you could be from like a spiritual standpoint, but I just like I was not prepared. Like the one thing that I didn't prepare for was being completely like at a loss of like having absolutely no control over the situation, and like being in the hospital for 10 days and having like shots every like my child had to get like a prophylactic shot every 4 hours. Really? Because of it, and everyone had to wear masks. So it was a whole thing. It shook things up a lot, and And for me, what I did was I made art out of it, like the like painting that you can't show for like Facebook algorithm reasons. But that was me processing my birth trauma.
Oh,
Yeah.
as an aside, isn't it crazy though how fast they can get the baby out once they start the
Oh my God, it was
C-section
nothing.
operation?
It was just like, holy, what?
Because my wife went through that. I watched it happen. And I was just like, I feel like they had like a Daytona 500 pit crew in the room. They're like, hey guys, all right, we're all here to do this thing. Here's what I do. Here's what I do. You guys ready? And they just like, they're like, I remember they like were like poking at her and they're like, can you feel that? She's like, no. They're like, she's ready. And they just cut into her. And then like in like 2-3 minutes, like the baby was out. And I'm like, oh my God, like it's really fast.
I think that too highlighted of like, I was expecting an experience and I felt like I was denied that experience.
Yeah.
And the irony was that I had like more of an experience than I would have otherwise, because it was more painful for me to not have the experience than it would have been to have it.
Yeah.
So everybody's got to have, their story.
It was an experience. It's just not the experience that you had signed up for.
Yeah.
So let's pivot to benefits. What are the benefits of polyamorous parenting that you have experienced?
Many. I mean, part of it is just that you have more time to live your life the way that you wanted to. And I think I've always viewed myself as someone who would be more than just a mom. I think I grew up having seeing my mom feel somewhat consumed by the motherhood role.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until later in life that she like found a career that she was passionate about, and it made me so happy to see her fulfilled and happy that I kind of told myself, like, I don't want to be consumed by the role of motherhood.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what this allows me to do and to have is to like be more of who I am and to fulfill more aspects of myself.
Yeah. Something that I was reading is that parenting was more of a community effort in the past, and that system has kind of become eroded. And so like polyamorous parenting kind of allows for like more people to be there as a community to raise a child. Mm-hmm. Whereas like maybe it used to be that way. It's not so much anymore. I guess some families, the way they deal with this is they have like grandparents trying to pitch in to try to help out with some of the workload. Yeah. But maybe that's not an option for everyone for one reason or another. Mm-hmm. But beyond just having like extra people to help out, like it's not just helping out physically with the baby, but there's also like things such as like financially and emotional support, and like there's other aspects to it than just another person physically there.
Right. Well, and even like with complex decisions, it's helpful to be able to have so many perspectives. And I think we are really privileged in that we have 2 doctors in our family. And so, serious questions that have to do with like what is the best medical decision for the child is something that we can all share our experience about and have a conversation about and come to an answer that we feel good about.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would imagine that if you have more different types of personalities for a child to learn from, that would only be a positive as long as they're positive forces in the child's life. And then you're saying multiple opinions could perhaps create like a more accurate groupthink answer.
Exactly, yeah.
Like one person's like, maybe we do this, and another person's like, maybe we do that, and it becomes like a better combined answer.
Exactly.
I see. Okay. Well, are there any other benefits that come to mind for you that you've noticed in your relationship? I think one that I saw online is that if you have multiple children, then the children have more people to play with, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's maybe something too that we have a leg up on. specifically with regards to COVID is we have a bigger bubble of like a pod that we are in. And so if you have to quarantine with your like inner circle, we happen to have a pretty big inner circle.
Yeah. So it doesn't really feel like you're having to give a whole lot up.
Yeah. And granted, we are, like, just as everybody is. But I think like we went from like running an enormous community center where we saw like hundreds of people every day to now we're going down to our inner circle, which is granted a large inner circle. So we went from like here to here, and other people went from like here to here.
Well, there's some people that I mean, I have friends that are single, and they're just like, I guess I'm with my cat.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I'm really grateful that we have it set up where like our little quarantine pod is like really filled with love.
So you mentioned earlier energy levels that like you're able to have more time to like fulfill your artistic pursuits or career pursuits, and it's like if it's just like one or two people focusing on the child, that you can get burnt out. And so I think for me that's a big benefit, that you have a lot of people that are all working together towards a common goal, and it's like, I don't know, it seems like a win-win. It's like you guys like each other, you like spending time with each other, you're helping each other fulfill your sexual desires, your friendship desires, your desire to raise a child together. Like, it seems like as long as everyone is having their needs met, and it's like, why not, I guess? I don't know. But I think that I don't know. I think about it though, and personally, it still sounds hard to pull off.
I think that the starting of going down that path is absolutely difficult. And I don't know that I've heard of anybody who's like seamlessly transitioned into polyamory without like a lot of emotional ups and downs. And I think like, we've gotten to a pretty stable point in our polyamory, and even us, we have like our own emotional trials and tribulations that we have to go through. And so I would say, while like the destination that we've currently arrived to feels really stable and like sweet and pretty full of benefits, it wasn't without its struggles.
It wasn't perfect. Yeah.
It like we put a shitload of work into this.
Yeah.
We've all put so much emotional investment and so much of ourselves into building this life for ourselves, that it can be beautiful, and it can be like just really win-win for all of us. But that's not that we got there without a lot of work.
But I think pretty much everything in life, nothing good comes easy.
Yeah.
So it's like if you have to work for it, I think it's not a problem. A few more benefits real quickly that I saw online from this article that I thought it'd be interesting to mention. And I know that your kid right now is 17 months old and hasn't grown up that much, but according to this research, kids learn a lot about valuable communication and relationship skills from polyamorous parents, and that this can translate into having like a higher degree of maturity, self-confidence, self-reliance, better interpersonal skills. So I guess they're modeling, hypothetically how their parents are acting, which can be good for the kid. Also, it says that kids get to see a different relationship style than monogamy. And so they learn at an early age not to make assumptions about what's normal. And so they learn this like critical thinking tool where they're like, okay, there isn't a normal or abnormal. There's just a more common and less common.
Right. And
I think that critical thinking is a invaluable, tool to instill into your child.
Yeah.
So.
I look forward to seeing my child or children turning into really emotionally resilient people. And I would like to think that they would be able to see that anything that they want is is an option.
One of the pushbacks about this topic that I saw is people were like, but if you're polyamorous and you have kids, are they going to become polyamorous too? Like it's a bad thing to become polyamorous? Have you heard that?
Yeah, and actually it's kind of funny because I use my brother-in-law as sort of an example for that, because he basically, I think he's like 7 years younger than us. So he, and I've known him since he was 7. And so he's basically grown up with polyamory as like a pretty strong influence in his life. And he definitely considered it. But at the moment he's in a monogamous relationship, as is my wife's sister. Whereas like my sister's in somewhat of a polyamorous relationship. So it's like we've got like 3 sibling examples, 2 of which turned out to be monogamous at the moment and 1 of which is currently not. And so like, you know, you can use that as a parallel to children of like people who like have had been heavily influenced by our relationships. And I think they all at least were granted the opportunity to decide if that was what they wanted or not. And they didn't all cheat, like more often than not, they didn't.
Yeah. So I think we need to give kids more credit.
Yeah.
That they can become their own person, and it's not, you know, parenting doesn't like define what your kid will be.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. So where can people go online if they're interested in learning more about polyamorous parenting? Do you have any resources that you would recommend? Any YouTube videos or books or anything that comes to mind?
As far as polyamorous parenting, there are some Facebook groups. There's one that's like, there's actually like polyamorous families in Seattle. I don't actually remember what it's called, but I think if you search a lot of the like keywords for like polyamorous families on Facebook, there are like groups for that. I know of books, but they're just for just like poly in general. I don't know that there's a good poly book I could recommend. Unfortunately, it feels like we're on like the front of a wave, right?
Yeah.
Like that we kind of got in on the ground floor, and there aren't
not a lot of
it's
info.
not a big pool of people to draw on.
I found a community on Reddit called Poly Families that I guess people will talk about stuff on here, but it's mostly just memes.
Yeah.
And
well,
there's some interesting stories on here that I've been reading about, but yeah.
I've also found that like Reddit doesn't feel as like community full as like Facebook groups, because it's like it's not a container.
Oh.
Whereas like the Facebook group, you can get to know who's in there and like start to like, especially if it's like a local group, you can kind of like get a feel for like who's in the group and like over time get to know it. Whereas like Reddit kind of comes in and out, so it's hard to like get a sense of like which families are regularly like contributing to the subreddit.
I see. Okay.
But it is good for like sort of like broader questions.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Is there anything that you would like to say to the viewers out there that we haven't addressed that you'd like to get off your chest?
I feel like I should let's just like plug my stuff.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you can follow Synaptic Art on Facebook, or go to synaptic-art.com for my my art. I also welcome new friend requests. I am pretty open about my life and open to questions, so I totally welcome any questions that people have for me. And I'm pretty active on Facebook too.
Natalie.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yup.
All right. Well, Natalie, thanks for being on the show. I have learned a lot about polyamorous parenting that I did not know. It definitely seems to me like it is more realistic than I initially thought. If I'm being honest, like I think that before this interview, the way that I saw it is incompatible, really.
Yeah.
Because of the things and the messaging that I've received in my life that the whole concept of marriage is to create. I mean, this is just the programming that I've received from the outside world, is that, you get married to create some kind of structure so that when you have kids, the kids have an environment that protects them and teaches them how to be a functioning human before you, like, I don't know, like and I guess there's much more to relationships than that.
Yeah.
There's much more, and marriage can be anything you want it to be.
Yeah.
But I mean, anyway, and I guess from the messaging that I've received in my life, I think that the pushback has been, if you involve more people, you're increasing the chances of just everything blowing up in your face. But I think after hearing from you and how you've been able to have one long-term relationship after another, and instead of it being, let me replace this person with this person and replace in like relationship hop, it's been more of I like this about this person and I want to incorporate them into my life. I like this about that person. I want to incorporate them into my life. And it's become this thing that's growing and growing. To me, that seems less threatening. Mm-hmm. It seems more like something you're building that can be, honestly, a stronger support network for children than just being in it on your own or with one person.
Yeah.
So I think that you've changed my mind in that way. So thank you.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So thanks for being on the show. And we will post links for Natalie, all of her art links and stuff like that in the video in the comment section. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.